Ron kept them in his truck overnight so that he could have cookies for breakfast the next morning. Ron looked up, spotted her at the stoplight, and raised one hand in a wave. Hannah gave him a toot of her horn as the light turned green and she drove on by. With his dark, wavy hair and well-muscled body, Ron was certainly easy on the eyes. Hannah's youngest sister, Michelle, swore that Ron was every bit as handsome as Tom Cruise, and she'd been dying to date him when she was in high school. Even now, when Michelle came back from Macalester University, she never failed to ask about Ron. 3 years ago, everyone had expected the star quarterback of the Lake Eden Gulls to be drafted by the pros. But Ron had torn a ligament in the final game of his high school career, ending his hopes for a spot with the Minnesota Vikings. There were times when Hannah felt sorry for Ron. She was sure that driving a cozy cow delivery truck wasn't the glorious future he'd envisioned for himself. But Ron was still a local hero. Everyone in Lake Eden remembered his remarkable game-winning touchdown at the state championships. The trophy he'd won was on display in a glass case at the high school, and he volunteered his time as an unpaid assistant coach for the Lake Eden Gulls. Perhaps it was better to be a big fish in a little pond than a third-string quarterback who'd warm the Vikings' bench. No one else was on the streets this early, but Hannah made sure that her speedometer read well below the 25-mile limit. Herb Beesman, their local law enforcement officer, was known to lie in the wait for unwary residents who were tempted to tread too heavily on the accelerator. Though Hannah had never been the recipient of one of Herb's speeding tickets, her mother was still livid about the fine that Marge Beesman's youngest son had levied against her. Hannah turned at the corner of Main and 4th and drove into the alley behind his shop. The square white building sported 2 parking spots, and Hannah pulled her truck into one of them. She didn't bother to unwind the cord that was wrapped around her front bumper and plug it into the strip of power outlets on the rear wall of the building. The sun was shining, and the announcer was on the radio, who had promised that the temperatures would reach the high 40s today. There was no need to use her head bolt heater for another few weeks, but when winter arrived and the mercury dropped below freezing, she needed to ensure that her engine would start. Once she'd opened the door and slid out of her Suburban, Hannah locked it carefully behind her. There wasn't much crime in Lake Eden, but Herb Beesman also left tickets on any vehicle that he found parked and unlocked. Before she could cover the distance to the rear door of the bakery, Claire Rogers pulled up in her little blue Toyota and parked in the back of the tan building next to Hannah's shop. Hannah stopped and waited for Claire to get out of her car. She liked Claire, and she didn't believe the rumors that floated around town about her affair with the mayor. "Hi Claire, you're here early today." "I just got in a new shipment of party dresses and they have to be priced." Claire's classically beautiful face lit up in a smile. "The holidays are coming, you know." Hannah nodded. She wasn't looking forward to Thanksgiving and Christmas with her mother and sisters, but it was an ordeal that had to be endured for the sake of family peace. "You should stop by, Hannah." Claire gave her an appraising look, taking in the bomber jacket that had seen better days and the old wool watch cap that Hannah had pulled over her frizzy red curls. "I have a stunning little black cocktail dress that would do wonders for you." Hannah smiled and nodded, but she had all she could do to keep from laughing as Claire unlocked the rear door to Beaumont Fashions and stepped inside. Where could she wear a cocktail dress in Lake Eden? No one hosted any cocktail parties, and the only upscale restaurant in town had closed down right after the tourists had left. Hannah couldn't remember the last time she'd gone out to fancy dinner. For that matter, she couldn't remember the last time that anyone had asked her out on a date. Hannah unlocked her back door and pushed it open. The sweet smell of cinnamon and molasses greeted her, and she began to smile. She had mixed up several batches of cookie dough last night, and the scent still lingered. She flipped on the lights, hung her jacket on the hook by the door, and fired up the 2 industrial gas ovens that sat against the back wall. Her assistant, Lisa Herman, would be here at 7:30 to start the baking. The next half hour passed quickly as Hannah chopped, melted, measured, and mixed ingredients. By trial and error, she'd found that her cookies tasted better if she limited herself to batches that she could mix by hand. Her recipes were originals developed in her mother's kitchen when she was a teenager. Dolores thought baking was a chore, and she'd been happy to delegate the task to her eldest daughter so she could devote all of her energies to collecting antiques. At 7:10, Hannah carried the last bowl of cookie dough to the cooler and stacked the utensils she'd used in her industrial-sized dishwasher. She hung up her apron, removed the paper cap she'd used to cover her curls, and headed off to the coffee shop to start the coffee. A swinging restaurant-style door separated the bakery from the coffee shop. Hannah pushed it open and stepped inside, flipping on the old-fashioned globe fixtures she had salvaged from a defunct ice cream parlor in a neighboring town. She walked to the front windows, pulled aside the chintz curtains, and surveyed the length of Main Street. Nothing was moving. It was still too early, but Hannah knew that within the hour, the chairs that surrounded the small round tables in her shop would be filled with customers. The cookie jar was a meeting place for the locals, a choice spot to exchange gossip and plan out the day over heavy mugs of strong coffee and freshly baked cookies from her ovens. The stainless steel coffee urn gleamed brightly, and Hannah smiled as she filled it with coffee, water, and measured out the coffee. Lisa had scored it yesterday, restoring it to its former splendor. Lisa was a pure godsend when it came to running the bakery and the coffee shop. She saw what needed to be done, did it without being asked, and had even come up with a few cookie recipes of her own to add to Hannah's files. It was a real pity that Lisa hadn't used her academic scholarship to go on to college, but her father, Jack Herman, was suffering from Alzheimer's, and Lisa had decided to stay home to take care of him. Hannah removed 3 eggs from the refrigerator behind the counter and dropped them, shells and all, into the bowl with the coffee grounds. Then she broke them open with a heavy spoon and added a dash of salt. Once she'd mixed up the eggs and shells with the coffee grounds, Hannah scraped the contents of the bowl into the basket and flipped on the switch to start the coffee. A few minutes later, the coffee began to perk, and Hannah sniffed the air appreciatively. Nothing smells better than a freshly brewed coffee, and Hannah and everyone in Lake Eden said that her coffee was the best. Hannah tied on the pretty chintz apron she wore for serving her customers and ducked back through the swinging door to give Lisa her instructions. "Bake the chocolate chip crunches first, Lisa." Hannah gave Lisa a welcoming smile. "They're already in the ovens, Hannah." Lisa looked up from the stainless steel work surface where she was scooping out dough with a melon baller and placing the perfectly round spheres into a small bowl filled with sugar. She was only 19, 10 years younger than Hannah was, and her petite form was completely swaddled in the huge white baker's apron she wore. "I'm working on the molasses crackles for the Boy Scout Awards banquet now." Hannah had originally hired Lisa as a waitress, but it hadn't taken her long to see that Lisa was capable of much more than pouring coffee and serving cookies. At the end of the first week, Hannah had increased Lisa's hours from part-time to full-time and taught her to bake. Now they handled the business together as a team. "How's your father today?" Hannah's voice held a sympathetic note. "Today's a good day." Lisa placed the unbaked tray of molasses crackles on the baker's rack. "Mr. Drevlo is taking him to the seniors group at Holy Redeemer Lutheran." "But I thought your family was Catholic." "We are, but Dad doesn't remember that. Besides, I don't see how having lunch with the Lutherans could possibly hurt." Neither do I, and it's good for him to get out and socialize with his friends. That's exactly what I told Father Cultus. If God gave Dad Alzheimer's, he's got to understand when Dad forgets what church he belongs to. Lisa walked to the oven, switched off the timer, and pulled out a tray of chocolate chip crunches. I'll bring these in as soon as they're cool. Thanks. Hannah went back through the swinging door again and unlocked the street door to the coffee shop. She flipped the closed sign in the window to open and checked the cash register to make sure there was plenty of change. She had just finished setting out small baskets of sugar packets and artificial sweeteners when a late model dark green Volvo pulled up in the spot by the front door.